Hello everybody, this is Bill, one of the Cryptid Brothers, and we appreciate you clicking on tonight's episode. You're gonna love it. As you can see, I'm out in the woods and it's raining, and so I thought that might be cool for you guys to actually enjoy some scenery. So thank you again for all you guys do in regards to your listenership and liking, subscribing. It really helps us grow the channel. This is part 2 of the deathbed confession from the gentleman out of Oregon that called us, Gary. He's got some crazy, scary encounters, and we'll be talking about that here shortly. We're trying and working hard every week to bring you guys and gals some awesome, cool, frightening encounters, some cryptid encounters. So we appreciate your listenership, and just please share your comments. We love reading them. So I hope you enjoyed part 1. He had a few other stories to share with me before we get into his own terrifying encounter. This was about 10 years before Ed's frightening encounter. He said that he was watching the news, and this was around the Susanville, California area, and he said that the gentleman on the news piece was describing a frightening encounter that he had, and he was a gold prospector. He had staked a claim. He was by himself. It was deep in the woods of Northern California, and while he was pounding stakes in the ground, he said that there was a bunch of squatches that came up, actually chased him off this land that he was on. He thought he was going to die. These things were according to the news piece, were literally pushing him down. And so he was able, fortunately, to make his way out of this area. And so he brought the news crew back and was showing the news crew where this had happened. And we're in the soil, the areas where he was pushed down, the soil was disturbed. And so I thought that was crazy. Fast forward to the late 1990s. So Gary was telling me that he had actually 2 separate road encounters. And one was when he was by himself, and then one was when he was with his nephew. He said that when he was with his nephew, it was daytime. They were going down this paved road, but very mountainous road, very steep. And so they were about in second gear, and to the side, they saw a glimpse of something. And by the time they passed whatever this was, they saw in their rearview mirror, this creature. He said it was black on 2 legs. Again, he didn't get a detailed sighting of this, but they noted that it had 2, giant long arms, and it just bounded over the road. And he saw this in the rear view. And so he said that the second encounter was when, and by the way, his nephew at the time was a kid, but old enough at the time to hunt. But after that, he didn't want to hunt by himself, or at least a far distance from anybody else, which totally, I get it. Especially, you see one of these things and you're a kid, even as an adult. So the second road encounter he described to me, it was about 2:30 a.m. He was by himself. He's driving around this long curve. This was in the Kern River Valley area of California in the Sierra Nevada mountains. And he said that this creature on all 4s looked like a massive hyena, and it was just yards in front of him. He wasn't going extremely fast, but he got a visual right up in front of him with his lights just shining on this thing. And he said he estimated this creature to be about 600 pounds, and that at the shoulders, the height was about 5 feet. The length was around 8 feet. He couldn't see a lot of detail of the face, but what he did see when this looked at him, he said that the head was shaped like a dog, essentially. The snout was somewhat like a boxer dog's snout, and that it had 2 green eyes, the eye shine in his lights. Scared him to death. This thing actually bounded about 30 feet to the right, up the mountain, over a barbed wire fence. He said this thing was just massive, just broad chest, like I said, hyena-like. And it was going in the direction, he told me, toward an area where there's a lot of caves. And in this particular area of California, there's like over 200 caves. The longest I was reading is about 17 miles. So an extensive cave system. And it sounds like he saw a Dogman. And I'm sure that these creatures use these cave systems. And Gary was telling me several years prior to this second encounter where he saw this Dogman-like creature, that this cave system that this creature was headed to, that he's actually explored several times, and went one time with several friends about 6 miles through this cave network. So I was reading that this cave system, it's called the Deep Creek Cave Complex, and it's home to several invertebrate species. There's a rare bat that lives there as well. But Gary said if you ever get a chance, you gotta check out this place. It's just extremely beautiful. He also told me that, and this is really cool and just super scary, but he said that in 1997, this was about 12 years before Rick's encounter that Rick had on the ridge line that I described in part 1, that Gary got permission to hunt this certain mountainside. And he had always hunted the opposite side, but he was super pumped that he got to hunt this particular mountainside. He got permission from the landowner. I guess there were several gates you had to go into. The landowner gave Gary the key to get in. So Gary goes in, gets past like the second or third gate, and so he's driving, very thick forested area, and not driving very fast at all. And 2 black-tailed deer jump in front of him, just bound in front of him. He said one was a giant buck, and it went off to the right down the mountainside. So Gary pulls over, he gets out of his truck, and he follows these deer. He's tracking these deer down this mountainside. Again, it's super thick, and it takes him about 45 minutes to get down to this area at the bottom. And when he gets down there, there's a creek, and he smells something just vile. And so he's scanning around, kind of wondering, you know, what this smell is. And he told me that he saw just a few feet away, actually, this mound of human-looking poop. He said that it was about the size of a 2-gallon bucket, and that on top of it, there was about a 2 feet high pinch. And what freaked him out is just the sheer size of this, but then also it was steaming. And he said he immediately got a bad vibe. I mean, he's like wondering what the heck is going on. He's scanning the woods. It freaked him out enough, he told me, to where he actually, what took him 45 minutes to get down this mountainside, took him 10 minutes to get back to the truck. So that would have been super scary to see that, especially if it was steaming. He then went on to explain his own terrifying encounter. He said that this was September 2017, so just last fall. And Gary, like I said earlier, he's a big-time elk hunter. There's a subspecies of elk called Roosevelt elk. They're just a large species of elk that you'll find in the Pacific Northwest. And so he gets on Google Maps. This is just outside of Glendale, Oregon. And he gets on Google Maps. He's looking for potential areas to hunt. So he looks at this one promising area. So he actually drives out there, and he said it's super remote, but this road that he's driving on, once he gets out there, it kind of dead ends, but there's like 2 homes on each side of the road. And there just happens to be a gentleman out in his yard, an elderly gentleman. And so Gary pulls over and he asks him, he says, does anyone ever come back here, and who owns this land? And the guy's like, well, I own the land. And Gary asked him, would you mind if I hunted back behind your home? He said, oh, absolutely. Go right ahead. No one ever comes back here. So on the day of his hunt, just prior to that, actually, he scouts all day and decides he's going to hunt a particular area. So this, again, was probably within half a mile of this gentleman's house behind his home. So Gary scouts all day, and then his plan is to actually sleep in his truck. So he said he was so exhausted from scouting. And this area, by the way, Gary was telling me, it had been logged several years prior, but that there was beautiful meadows and just tons of elk. So he was really, really excited about hunting. So he's got a Super Duty truck. He falls asleep. Like I said, super exhausted. He said it's about 4:15 in the morning, and he feels his truck shake, and it wakes him up. He thought that it could have been an earthquake, and it freaked him out. He's wondering what's going on. He actually turns on his lights to the truck looking out, and he said that he didn't expect to see this, but there's this fog that's just super thick around his truck, and it's only about 2 feet off the ground. He doesn't see anybody, hear anything. He just felt his truck shake. So he's on edge, obviously, which I can understand that. He wonders what that was that shook his whole entire truck. He kind of drifts off to sleep, and it's about 30 minutes later he decides, and this is about 4:45 in the morning, he decides that he's going to get ready, get his things around. So he's still in the truck, he's getting his gear ready, and as soon as he opens his door, and he's in the driver's seat, but before he got his leg out, that the door just slams back and throws him in the middle of the cab, and just so violently, and he's freaking out. He doesn't know what to think. It's still dark, and he's in the middle of the cab looking left, right, forward, and behind him, and the lights are completely off, and he just sits there, drops the hammer on his 45, and he's just waiting to rock and roll. He doesn't know what's going on. He sits there another 45 minutes and decides basically that, you know what, I've planned this hunt. I've done my Google search. I've asked permission to hunt this. I want to hunt elk. So he's like, I'm going to still hunt. So he gets his things ready again, basically, and he's got his pistol at the ready. And by this time, he said the fog had lifted to about 10 feet off the ground, but it's still pretty much dark and just getting into twilight. So he gets out, and he's got night vision, and he's scanning the area. He doesn't see anything, doesn't hear anything. He said that to his left was a very super thick area of trees, and so he's kind of focusing on that. He doesn't see anything in his night vision, so he proceeds to walk toward the area where he decided to hunt. So as he's walking toward this area, to his right, he said that there's the mountainside that just the day prior he saw all these elk. Well, he didn't see any elk up there when he scanned it with his night scope. He thought that was super odd. He said, you know, at least there'd be a few elk up there, but he didn't see an elk at all. So to his left is lower ground, and there's a creek down there. So he hears about 150 yards to his left some commotion in the foliage, and he's excited because he thinks that's a bull elk thrashing the foliage with its horns. So Gary lets out a call, an elk call. Some of you, I'm sure, may be some elk hunters, but essentially you call, you listen, and you move forward as you get a response back from the elk. He continues to work his way toward this area, and he calls again, and what he notices is that it's about a 70 feet tall tree just violently swaying. It's about 7 inches in diameter, he was telling me. And so he's wondering, what the heck, why is this whole tree swaying? I mean, that's not typical for an elk to do that. But he's not thinking squatch at this point in time. He's thinking elk, and that's his mission. And so as he's looking through his night scope after he called, he sees this tree falling toward him, actually. Now, he said he was a fairly safe distance away, but it was probably 100 yards away, but it's roughly a 70 feet tall tree that he's looking at. This tree is just falling toward him. It snapped. He's actually uphill from this thing, but it's coming toward him. But again, he's a safe distance away, he told me. And he said what he saw in his night vision is something that scared him so bad that he's never been scared in the woods before until this time. And he said that the tree break where it snapped was roughly about 7 feet tall. But peering over the tree break, he said was 2 red eyes. And he got a brief look at the outline of this thing, and he said that it was massive, massive arms that hung down. The chest, the shoulders were so gigantic that the head was relatively small compared to the body, but that its arms were just so long. And he didn't hear anything other than the snap of the tree. But once he saw this in his night vision, he said he tore off. This thing scared him so bad. And he sprinted back to his truck. He just left the area, got in his truck, went back home, and basically decided, you know what? I gotta see what this thing is. I gotta understand what was going on. And if you haven't noticed by now, Gary's a persistent guy. And so Gary gets his 30-30, he gets his hot rounds, and about 1:30 p.m., he goes back to the area. He stopped at the landowner's house and knocked on the door and basically told him what happened to him, and asked the guy, do you have any strange things happen around here, like Bigfoot? And the guy's demeanor basically goes from a very kind, accepting demeanor to one of avoidance and disdain. And the guy slams the door on him. And Gary's shocked. And so what he does is he goes down to this area, and actually to where this tree had snapped. He said that this was a fir tree that was green, and that he saw prints around this tree, and that he measured it. It was 7 feet high, and he said the eyes, the 2 red eyes that he saw above peering over this tree snap was about 1.5 feet taller than that. Just snapped this thing, this green fir tree. He said it was about 10 inches in diameter. And just the massive amount of strength that it took to push this tree over is just amazing. You know, Gary, he's hunted all his life, and he's not let these encounters deter him from going to the woods. I mean, it's in his blood. He's sent me pictures, and I'm gonna include some of the pictures Gary actually sent me. Beautiful picture, beautiful countryside. And I hope to someday visit up there to the Pacific Northwest. It's just beautiful. But I want to thank you guys again for listening, for sharing, subscribing. You guys are awesome. We appreciate your comments. Please leave your comments. We want to know what things you like, what things you don't like. And remember, if you've had a personal encounter with a Bigfoot or Dogman, we'd love to hear from you. So please email us or call us. And we are blessed to receive so many calls and emails. So please be patient. We will absolutely get to you as quickly as we can. And so have a wonderful week. We'll be working hard to bring you, again, some crazy, scary, cool encounters next week. So from all of us at the Cryptid Brothers Investigations of Oklahoma, we thank you and enjoy your week.